Hey everybody, welcome back to Pausing for Prayer. I'm Mike St. Pierre, and today we're going to be talking about Advent. What does it have to do with your prayer life? What does it have to do with waiting? Before we go any further, let me just say, if you find value to this podcast or this video, please subscribe. It helps me get this in front of other people just like you and me who want to pray better. Okay, so Advent. First of all, what is Advent? It comes from a word which means coming, and it entails this idea of waiting right before Christmas. Typically, Christians have certain seasons: ordinary time, Advent, Lent, Easter time, Christmas time, etc. It's really just the church's way of helping us mark time. And Christmas is obviously one of the most crucial celebrations for Christians around the world. It's this celebration of God becoming a man in the form of this beautiful little baby, Jesus of Nazareth. And that one baby changed the world. We wouldn't be here today if it weren't for Christmas a couple of thousand years ago. So the church gives us typically 4 weeks leading up to the celebration of Christmas where we can be more mindful of the incarnation of Christ, where we can be more reflective, and this is really where today's video comes in, where we can understand waiting in a different way. So typically, we think about waiting in terms of kind of surfacey things, right? Like my Netflix video isn't loading fast enough, or I'm waiting in the post office, and I'm recording this in December 2020, and it's COVID time, and so you can't even go to a store without having more waiting than usual. I even go to the post office, and again, there's more waiting than usual. And I don't really like it. I don't know about you. I hate to wait. I really do. Even if my Wi-Fi speed is slow, it bothers me. It's like annoying, right? Maybe you can relate to that. What Advent does is it helps us take our moments of waiting and put it in the bigger context, really a theological context of waiting for the second coming of Jesus. But here's where I'd like to invite you and I to look at waiting in a different way, on a deeper level. And it's the waiting that actually permeates our lives in many different ways that we might not typically be aware. Let me explain. Think about in your family relationships. There's probably a relationship that you have, a person in your family, who isn't quite where you want them to be. Maybe they're just not thriving, they're not flourishing, however you define that. That's incomplete. It's a waiting. Or how about in terms of your job? You've been working hard, putting in the time, you have the expertise, and maybe you just aren't seeing the results that you want to see yet. That's a waiting. How about in your prayer life, your relationship with Christ? You know that you want to be more prayerful. You do feel occasionally like you're doing a good job in terms of your prayer life, but something just isn't clicking. You're not where you want to be. You just don't feel close enough to God on a regular basis. Again, that's a waiting. There's a sense of incompleteness. So in that sense, there's actually a lot more waiting in our lives than we typically acknowledge. So what do we do with all this? We have the surface level waiting. We have the more deep kinds of waiting, those that really get us up in the night. What do we do with that? Well, I want to invite you to, for the rest of this Advent, do 2 things. One, take some time over the next couple weeks before Christmas and inventory those things that are not yet complete in your life, those things that just aren't where you want them to be. Again, in your work, in your finances, in your relationship with your kids or your spouse or your parents, in your work, in your ministry, in your prayer life, wherever it is that you just feel like it's not quite there. Inventory that, write that down, talk with God about that, and just name it. There's tremendous power when you can name the things that are bothering you. Second, and this is really where the magic happens, when you feel bothered by one of these waitings, one of these incompletions in your own life, ask God to bless that, to sanctify your waiting. When you do that, you're really doing 2 things. And this is, I think, the beauty of Advent. It's why the church in her wisdom gives us this season. One, it teaches you patience. It teaches you patience that, you know what? I can keep waiting. It's okay. And I can really let go and really give that over to God and trust that He's doing His work. Second thing it does is it reminds us that we're made for heaven. and that ultimately we want to be one with God in heaven, where there will be no more waiting and no more things in our lives that are incomplete. I hope you found value to today's very brief, very simple meditation and reflection. If you do, please make sure you subscribe, and let's be praying for one another for the rest of this Advent.